proud to support Three Beards Media, and I would love to work with you. If you need merchandise for your company, organization, band, softball team, whatever, I can help. From name brand apparel to promotional items, large orders or small, online stores, and more, I can help your brand stand out. AKC Marketing is local, based in Johnston, and we are an employee-owned business, so our costs are low and our turnaround times are fast. But most importantly, we give you personal service to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. Email me at andrew@akcmarketing.com or find me on social media, and let's make some cool stuff together. Now sit back and enjoy this Three Beards Media podcast.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Old Man Strength. I am your host, Chris Shipley, broadcasting live from the Andrew Downs AKC Marketing Studios with my guest co-host who fills in quite a bit, a brother from another mother, not necessarily related, and not as handsome as me, but the other Shipley that's on the Three Beards Media Network, Drew Shipley. Drew, thanks for hopping on tonight, man.
Yeah, of course. You're starting the Cyhawk firing right off the get. Is that what I'm hearing now?
Goddamn right. Goddamn right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. Do they have Walmarts out there where you can buy your merchandise?
I got to tell you, like the closest Walmart here is like 30 minutes away. We are a very Target infiltrated community here. There's a Target on every corner,
Yeah.
but not a Walmart.
As I would tell Amy, Target sucks. I hate Target. It's the worst store. I would rather go to a Walmart than a Target. How about that?
That's fair. That's
fair,
okay.
right? So, but as always, we are brought to you by Revelton Distilling Company and Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage, and our newest sponsor, Green Beret Realty, who we will get to here in a little bit. But Drew, how have you been? It's football season. Iowa scored 40 points. You got to be on some kind of a high right now.
Yeah, after the first half, I'm on quite the high. It kind of seems like this long extended weekend, right, Chris? So like we get a lot of 4-day weekends when holidays land like this. Holiday Monday, we get Friday off too. But it seems like everything I had scheduled or like added to my schedule was at like the very end of the weekend. So like I felt like I had a lot of downtime Friday, Saturday, kind of Sunday, but now everything is packed into like the last 8 hours. So I'm holding on by a thread, go back to work tomorrow. But guess what? My bachelor party's this weekend, bro.
Oh, man. Crazy.
We're going to Ocean City, baby. It's going to be beautiful. Nice.
And when's your wedding again?
Be November 9th. So we actually are still 2 months out. But
awesome.
Yeah, getting all my Iowa friends out here. Since we're having the wedding in Iowa, I wanted to have my friends have an opportunity to come visit out here.
Awesome.
And that was kind of the way that I navigated that the bachelor party.
And is your fiance from Iowa, or is she?
Yeah, she's from Gowrie, so up by like Fort Dodge. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, the armpit of Iowa, Fort Dodge. I'm aware of that. Has nothing to do with her. I'm just saying, if you wanted to pull the worst towns in Iowa, Fort Dodge would be right up there.
Well, that's why she's from Gowrie, so we're good. We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Well,
it's not like Keokuk or Burlington.
Yeah, I stopped once for a cup of coffee in Keokuk, and that was enough for me.
Yeah. A lot of those river towns, man. Clinton is on that list for sure, top 5.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could. I know people get sensitive about the word shitholes, but it might apply to that.
That's why we put the explicit language on the podcast. That's why Josh gives us a warning at the beginning of every episode of Old Man Strength. So
it's wonderful.
Right. All right. Let's not delay any further, because I am super excited to bring on this new guest and our newest sponsor. I'm super excited. It's kind of a strange twist of turns of how Dan and I connected, which is kind of a fun story. But I believe is an important story because it's something that I've been preaching a lot lately on this podcast about how being able to bring people together and realizing that you can be friends and you can be great colleagues with people that necessarily may not have same views as everybody else, right? Same views as me or whatever else. And it's really important to me that I work on that. And this has been good. So I'm going to introduce our newest sponsor by also playing his ad, which, by the way, is highly rated. It's super cool. It might be the best ad that we've ever produced around here. But we'd love to bring on Dan Douglas with Green Beret Realty.
In 2023, a crack Green Beret named Dan Douglas retired his military command and promptly escaped to a full-time career in real estate. Today, this man is wanted by home buyers and sellers who want to survive the process without spending a fortune. If you have a home to sell or want to buy one, maybe you can hire Dan Douglas at Green Beret Realty. You can find him at greenberetrealty.com. greenberetrealty.com.
All right, Dan, that might be the greatest intro ever, right?
I love it. I love it.
The beautiful clean shaven face there.
Yeah. New pictures have already been taken. They're en route. I haven't taken it, sent them out to everybody yet. So we'll have to update a few things. You know, the ferret has grown on the face, the retirement beard, as we call it in the military community. So
I'm very jealous. Very jealous.
Well, you just got to talk to your provider. Everybody gets profiles. Just tell them you believe in Norse mythology or something like that. You can grow a beard.
You'd be surprised what I see at work. So actually, now that you say that, I've been in the medical waiver quality control game for about a year and a half out here at National Guard Bureau. So yeah, you can understand the kind of stuff that we see on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do here tonight is I want to get to know Dan a little more on a deeper level. I'm super interested to hear about his time in the military, his career, a little bit of time with the Secret Service, and Drew, I thought would be a perfect co-host here to help me navigate all the shit that I'm not going to understand, which is almost all of it. So, otherwise, I'll be talking about Fortnite and coded.
We'll try to break it down Barney style,
and I'll be an idiot. So, but
I had that exact phrase in my brain ready to fire, and then you just right on the head, Dan. Perfect.
Nailed it.
See, there we go. I don't even know what it means.
Break it down, Barney. You know, like Barney and Friends. I love you. You love me.
Oh, I got you. Okay, got it.
5 or 6 year olds understand, Chris.
I got it.
Bluey style, maybe Bluey. We'll break it down, Bluey.
Yeah. Bluey, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
You got to use something current because I'm totally hip with what's going on currently right now. Considering my youngest is 21 years old, so. Anyways, that's a terrible transition. I'm terrible at this. So. To begin with, Dan, what I'd love to do is talk a little bit about how you and I got connected, because I think it's important to understand that the concept, and Drew's not aware of this. So, and I'll start with where we connected a couple weeks ago, about a month and a half ago. Dan and I are both customers of Colin Newell at Colin Newell Farm Bureau Insurance. Colin was kind enough to have kind of like an open house where all his clients came and got to, I think Derek Huger showed up and we talked a little bit about the football game or whatever. And so I'm sitting at the bar, having a drink, and Dan walks up and we start to have a conversation. And we, as some guys do, we talk about sports. We start talking about some politics and things like that. And I'm sitting here, right. Yeah. And I'm sitting here listening to Dan talk to me, and I'm like, I don't know that him and I agree on everything, but he's a super chill guy, and he's super nice, and he's listening to my point of view, and I was listening to his. And there were a couple of times where he said something, and I'm like, you know what? I can understand that. Like, I can understand that point of view. So probably 20 minutes later, we started to talk about the podcast and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, let me show you the podcast. I said, what's your name? And I looked him up on Twitter, and I had blocked Dan. And then I remembered who Dan was. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. I blocked him at the time for what I thought was a good reason, right?
It probably was. To be fair, I told you at the time too, like when you blocked me, I was in full doucher move. I was I was out there just being mean.
And
to
it
people,
probably was around 2020, 2021 when
I was not having a good time.
When everybody's hackles were up or whatever else. And I can say without question later, looking back now, a lot of the shit that I would say back then is not something I would say now. Right. Because I've got to know other people that have a different point of view and whatever else. So anyways, I was like, you know what? I'm going to unblock you because this is the fundamental thing that I've been talking about a lot on this podcast and other podcasts is that number one, Twitter's not fucking real. And I can have a good conversation and a friendship with somebody that may not necessarily see things the same way that I do. And that's okay. And remember, I don't know, pre-2008, I feel like we used to do that.
Yep.
There was a lot of tribalism going on. And and there's been times since that Dan sent something out and I was like, nope.
I still got it.
I still got it. Phone down. And then we go meet for a drink last Saturday, and we spent there like an hour and a half just shooting the shit or whatever else. And it just reinforced for me that that Twitter isn't real and it's a limited communication tool. And to be able to get anywhere in this country, people have to come together and converse and be respectful and things like that. So that's Dan and I's history. But neither here nor there. It's just kind of unique to be able to do that, I think, because a lot of people don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I found the Twitter, the X platform, man, that 140 character limit, unless you're paying to get more, that provides some obstacles. There's hurdles in how we try to communicate with each other. But what I actually have found more complicated is you respond to one person and now all of a sudden you've got 5, 6, 7 people responding to you. And you almost lose track of like, who am I talking to about what? And were we having a civil conversation because this other one went off the rails and they're not being nice to me anymore. And now all of a sudden I find myself almost firing. Like right before we sat down for drinks, it was Grant, right? I was talking back and forth with Grant Mahoney. And there were a couple of times where I started typing up a message because I was responding to him, but felt like I was responding to somebody else who had not been kind. Right. And I had to delete. I'm like, I don't want to say that to him. Like, that's just inappropriate. And I just stopped talking to some of those other points of view. And I could focus on what I was talking with Grant. And so we were able to have a civil back and forth, even if we vehemently disagree with each other. I was never calling him names. I wasn't ostracizing him. I wasn't trying to insulate him or tell him he was wrong on everything. It was just like, no, understand a different perspective. You may not be right. You may be right, but you may not be, and just calm down, right? The rhetoric that we usually have around these things just gets so spun out of whack, and we end up hating each other. It's like, hey guys, we're all on the same team ultimately, right? Like we all kind of want the same goals. We just differ on how to get there. How are we going to achieve that result of more liberty for everybody and making sure we have a good society and we can raise our kids in a safe community? Like, how do we get there? And you disagree with me on how to get there, but we don't have to hate each other if we both want the same thing. So
yeah, it got really toxic there, like Chris was saying, 2020, 2021. Like, just if you disagree with me, fuck you type mentality, right? Like that's the end of the conversation. And I would say, like in my own personal journey and personal growth as a human, that I think I've learned more lessons and more about just listening to other people's perspectives, not necessarily like agreeing with them at the end of the day, but knowing where they come from instead of just dropping like fuck you. Like I'm not going to listen to you. I don't need to listen to you. And this is my way forward. And I don't really care about what other people think or feel. I used to be that kind of person on Twitter a little bit. And more so Facebook, actually, kind of posting some bizarre, things, I guess, not necessarily hate per se. I wouldn't say hate by any means, but like belittling a group of people that I disagreed with in the past. But I've definitely reeled that in, and I know Chris has as well. And I've seen a lot of personal growth in him in the last 3 or 4 years as well. I mean, we're in a professional environment here, right? Like we're all going to have a great conversation. Some about the Army, some about realty, sponsorships, being old men. Right, old man strength. Right.
So, what are you talking about? I'm young.
I don't know how old you were when you got out of the Army, Dan, but I'm 38 and I have 21 years of guard time in, and I'm pushing 58.
I did exactly 20 active duty, and I retired the end of March this year. So I haven't been out that long.
Good for you. That's why you got that fresh beard.
Yeah, but I entered at 20. I had gone to Iowa State for a few semesters before I decided this isn't working out for me. I gotta, go to do something else with my life. So I joined the Army, and I was 20, turned 21 in basic training. So I'm 41 now, but 20 years active duty, all done.
Let's get into that, Dan. So you went to Iowa State, but let's go back before that. Where did you grow up at? And tell me a little bit about growing up from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a long story, right? My dad and my mom met. They had both gone to Earlham High School, west of Des Moines, about 20 miles. They met there, got married. I was born when they lived in Huxley, between, Ankeny, Ames.
Yep.
And I grew up kind of around the Des Moines area. I think by the time I was old enough to remember anything, we'd moved to the north side of Des Moines. There's actually a little construction area there off of 14th Street, right south of the Interstate Exchange. We kind of grew up, we were up on that hill there. My grandfather was a construction. He was an engineer. He owned that construction company for years, and had a house there that he let my parents stay in. So I grew around there. I went to Cornell Elementary. I was homeschooled a little bit. Then they got divorced. We had moved to Hughes Avenue. I can't remember where that was. I want to say southeast Des Moines somewhere. Then we had moved kind of in the middle of Des Moines. I actually lived in an apartment above the gym that was behind Aqualand Pet Store on Euclid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was like a karate dojo there, the Rosenthal karate dojo, and we had a gymnasium that my stepdad ran, and we lived in an apartment above that for years. And I went to Oak Park Elementary for a year, maybe a year and a half. Went to Harding Middle School kind of part-time while I was homeschooling off and on, but I did like specialty classes, so gym, home ec, other classes at Harding Middle School. I was in band. And then I moved out to Earlham to live with my dad, who had moved kind of back out there. He was working at UPS, though, in Des Moines, would commute back and forth. And I graduated from Earlham High School and decided to go to Iowa State. I'm a long-time Cyclone fan. I grew up being able to go to games. My grandfather, being a graduate of Iowa State, had season tickets to football games and basketball games. I, grew up Johnny Orr time. I got to watch Fred Hoiberg and Julius Mikulik when I was little. I got to watch Diedrich Willoughby. Guys
when I was little, I was in college.
Yeah. Well, no, not as coaches. Right, I'm talking to watching them as players, right?
No, I know. I was in college when they were players. I know. And so when you say you're watching them as little,
you're a little young.
I'm a little bit.
Just kidding. But yeah, I grew up, got to watch that. My heyday, my high school years were like 98 to 2002. So that was like the heyday of Iowa State football, coming out of the doldrums of the 15-year, gap in the Cy-Hawk rivalry, and getting to watch the Elite Eight run with Marcus Fizer and Jamal Tinsley and Michael Nurse and those guys like Cantrell Horton. Like, it was phenomenal, right? That was a great time to be a fan. And then I went to Iowa State. I thought I was going to be an architecture student. Pre-architecture was not cut out for me. I didn't have the design mentality. I was very much on the engineering wavelength of like foundational things get built, and then I try to make them look pretty. And they were very much on the design, like, no, it's about space and shadows. And I couldn't grasp it. Like, it just wasn't sitting in my head. And I didn't have the discipline either. I won't say Earlham did a poor job. They did a great job, probably the best they could. But you can, it's a small school. You can literally do whatever you wanted there. I was in everything, right? When I say I was in band in middle school, I did band, and I was in concert band. I was in marching band. I played football, basketball. I ran track. I played baseball. I was in drama. I did speech. I mean, if you raised your hand and said, I'm willing to do it, they were just like, good, come on, we'll let you try, And so was I good at any of it? Some of it I was okay at, but I wasn't great at anything. But then that meant that most of my teachers in every class were a coach, or they were, the instructor for some special program I was in. So you always had a little bit of leeway, right? If I was a little bit like a day late on an assignment, it was okay. So I could stay up late, cram something, put it together. And I was never dumb, but I was procrastinate, and I would wait till the last minute, throw a bunch of stuff together. And that was not a recipe for like, hey, you're going to go to college and be successful, right? So I struggled, and about midway through my third semester, after I didn't get picked up for the architecture program, I was like, I'm gonna try it again and put my packet together and submit. And so I started pre-architecture for the third semester. And I was like, this just isn't working. I was like October, and I'm just like, no, I got to do something else. So I, left, talked to a recruiter, and he lied, said, I don't have anybody leaving right now. Like, hey, get back to me in February. And so I went and I got a job, framed houses for a little while. I'd done that in the summers for a few summers in a row. Did that for a little bit. And then when February came around, I signed some paperwork. And by the end of March, I was gone, through the MEP station and in the Army. So
it's interesting that you say that you lasted 3 semesters. That's about how long I lasted. Only Iowa State asked me to leave.
Yeah. I think if I had stuck it out for the whole third semester, they would have asked me to leave too.
And I don't know, Drew, I don't know that you've ever heard this story, and Dan, I'm sure you haven't, but I remember I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was in academic trouble, and so I decided I was going to transfer. I was going to change my major to leisure studies. And I remember I called my dad, and I was like, I think, Dad, I'm going to change my major to leisure studies. And he was like, yeah, what's that? And I was like, well, now bear in mind at the time I was like 360 pounds. I wasn't exactly fit or active. And I was like, well, you can like come up with like wellness programs for Fortune 500 companies, and workout programs, or you can be like a park ranger or work in the DNR or whatever. And he's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. And years later, I found out, my mom told me, he said he got off the phone with me and he hung up the phone. And he goes, well, he's like, I'll be damned if I'm going to pay $5,000 a year for him to be fucking leisure. He can do that shit for free at home. So he's like, plus that fat fucker, he ain't setting up no wellness program. He can't even set up a wellness program for his own. So needless to say, I did not go into leisure studies.
Sounds like he had a heart of gold.
He did, actually. He did. He just, at the time, looking back, he worked, he owned his own business. Yeah. He worked construction. He was paying for that money out of his pocket, and I had pissed away 3 semesters. And I remember going home, and I told him, I handed him the academic probation letter, and all he said to me was, and my dad was a yeller. Like, he was the poster child for Prozac. I'm not kidding you, man. But I was waiting for it. And all he said to me was, he goes, well, I really thought it would be me that would disappoint you first and not the other way around. Meaning, I figured at some point I wasn't going to be able to make a payment and you have to leave school. And I was like, oh my God, and to that day, I swore up and down, I never was going to ever rely on him to give me any money again, because I had disappointed it. But just a funny story, but kind of the same deal. I went back and I was like, I went in and I was like, what's the closest major that I'm closest to? And she's like, what? And I said, my academic advisor, I said, I got this many credits. What degree can I get that's closest? And she said, well, you're, I don't know, X number of credits away from a poli-sci degree. Sign me up. That sounds good. And she's like, what? And I was like, I'm in. I'll take a degree and then I'm fucking out of here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
What exactly does poli-sci get you for like a job?
So it gets you in my case, it gets you 20 years in IT and now a marketing job. So I don't know what that means, but to Dan's point, that was my plan at that point. Once I got a political science degree, and I was a huge political science nerd, right? Like that spoke to me. It was divine intervention. God knew what I was going to be good at. I got A's and B's the rest of the time I was there. And I did have every intention of going to law school. But I met my first wife, Taylor. Now Tyler was born. And my dad was running his business and needed help with that. And I thought, well, I could go farther into debt, or I can go work for my dad and start providing for the family that I have. And that's what I did. So
that's crazy. Dan and I have some stories about leisure studies as well. It's not exactly, actually, it might be more exciting than Iowa State. But
depends on how much leisure you want.
Tell us a little bit about the entry into the Army, Dan. Tell us, what was your experience like? Did you enter the delayed entry program? You went to basic training?
I did, but I didn't do. So I was in the delayed entry program before I even joined Iowa State and started going to school. And they didn't have me do any basic training, but I did some like basic. Hey, you're going to learn to march, and we're going to have you do a PT test and some basic things to kind of check some blocks before entering the Army. But at that point, I didn't actually think I was ever going to go to the Army. It was just something like I had kind of talked to a recruiter before going to college and was like, whatever, maybe. And looking back on it, I don't think I understood what I had signed into and what I had done, right? Like recruiters, for the record, anybody listening out there, recruiters lie, right? And sometimes they're just mildly dishonest, but other times they're just blatant liars. So when I went back to the same recruiter who hadn't yet PCS'd or moved away from the Iowa area, I went back to him and I was like, hey, I think I'm ready to join the Army. And he had said, I don't have any slots right now. Like, you have slots leaving every day. I could have just been an extra body on the next bird leaving, right? But again,
he already had his numbers for the first quarter. Man.
Exactly. Like, he was just trying to punt me to where he could. I know now, right? At the time, I didn't have a clue, but I know what he was doing now. And looking back, it didn't bother me either. Only I could have retired a few months earlier than I did.
Sure.
But then I went back to him and I was like, hey, I'm ready to go. And he's like, okay, so what do you want to be? And I had given up, right? There was the high school girlfriend who'd broken up with me. Like, I'm brokenhearted. I'm depressed. I'm don't know what to do with my life. I'm not a good student, even though I'm relatively smart. Like, I'm smart enough to be a good student, but I'm just not good at it. Like, forget it. I'm just screwed. I'm going to go die in war. Iraq's going on. Like, let me go there, right? And so
this
I
is a classic join the Army story, Chris. Just FYI.
It sounds familiar. That's not entirely untrue. I mean, my nephew was kind of the same way. He broke up with his girlfriend. He was depressed, was looking for something, and boom. I don't want to say the recruiter predatory like pounced on that, but
it is.
I mean,
it is.
That's
Yes.
But anyway, he's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, man, I like infantry. Like, I don't even know what you can do in the military, but like, I just want to go shoot people and, maybe get shot at. I don't know. Like, let's go do this thing. I'm worthless to everybody else. Let me go be something for my country. Right. That was kind of the mindset was, if I'm going to die, let me die doing something valuable. And at the time I thought that was valuable. I'm an idiot, right? You 20-year-old men, you guys are all idiots. If you're listening to this, all 20-year-olds are idiots.
There's a reason why my dad said the recruiter's not going out to a 30-year-old man's house and recruiting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They don't need you.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so I joined and I said I wanted to be infantry, and he was like, well, what about combat engineer? And I was like, well, what the heck is a combat engineer? And again, recruiters lie. So he's like, well, it's basically like infantry, only you get to carry explosives. You get to blow stuff up, right? And in my mind, I was like, if I get to do all the things infantry are doing and blow stuff up, like, who would say no to that, right? So I thought that's what I was doing. Again, I didn't know at the time. I know now. Infantry also carry explosives, and they carry door charges and other things like that. So everything I thought I was going to do, infantry already did, and he convinced me to be a combat engineer. So I went to basic training with a bunch of people that had, maybe the IQs of like advanced apes, and proceeded to go through training and be in basic learning these skills of like how to probe for landmines over my knuckles and how you'd use bigger charges to blow up bridges, and how to put in some of our, quick, more mobilizing bridges. So we've got some, we call them ribbon bridges, and there's some other bridge things that we actually build so we can quickly get across a river or something with vehicles. And that was what we learned how to do. And then I graduated from that, went to airborne school. So I'm jumping out of airplanes. And then I went straight to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty in North Carolina. And my first unit was 20th Engineer Brigade. And I got there, and in that whirlwind of like, what am I going to do with my life? I ended up at Fort Bragg, and they were leaving. My unit was leaving for Iraq that November. So I think I got there August, maybe, after airborne school. And then we were taken off in a few months to go to Iraq for the first time. So yeah, whirlwind. Great.
So Fort Leonard Wood?
Fort Lost in the Woods, Missouri. Leonard Wood down there. Yep.
That is the closest one, Chris, to Iowa, I believe.
I might be not the quickest one to drive to, though. Fort Riley's pretty close. I was there when I was finishing PA school later on in my career, and it was a quicker drive because you're like on highways and interstates most of the way. Fort Leonard Wood is kind of a little bit off the beaten path in kind of southern Missouri, but yeah.
What were your parents' reaction when you decided to do that? to make that move, Dan?
I don't really recall. I do remember that when I was like my mom crying, she did that with my little brother who is currently in basic training too. So she did similar thing with him, kind of, I think more like I didn't see this coming and now I'm worried because there's conflicts and stuff brewing and my son's joining the military like a fool. My dad, I didn't get a lot of reaction from him, but I'll be honest, there was a really cool moment afterwards. I believe it was after that first deployment. I came back and I was visiting back for Christmas. And he gave me a hug. And for the first time that I remember, I'm sure he had said it in passing at other times, but he was like, I'm really proud of you. I think it was just kind of not just you're in the Army. I don't think it was that. I think it was just a change in me. I'd seen some things at that point. I think I'd had a massive growing up experience in that short year. You age 3 or 4 years when you see some of the things you see in a combat environment. And I think he saw that and recognized that and heard some changes that I was making in the way I viewed the world and the way I was approaching things. And he was just like, I'm proud of you. And I just remember being like, whoa, like awesome. That was really cool. But yeah, joining, I don't really recall a lot. I was in that whirlwind. I was kind of in a depressed state and stuff. And there was a lot going on. I came to my faith at that point. Like I'd been raised in and around the church, but I really wasn't a real believer. And when I left college, I had kind of, I prayed, if you're up there, then you need an answer for this one question, this thing that was really gnawing at me. And then I was at my mom's visiting for a weekend and she had a video series that I was like going through and it was basically apologetics for that exact question. And I was like, I didn't even know this existed. Right. And so for me, that was an answer from him directly. And I just, started my faith at that time too. So there was so much going on in my life that like recalling how mom reacted, I don't really remember.
My joining experience. So I joined when I was 17, Dan. So as you know, I need parental consent to join. And my folks split when I was really young, and my dad was all gung ho about it. And the reasons why I wanted to do it was I joined the Iowa National Guard. There's an armory 2 blocks down from my high school, about 3 blocks from where I live, and that I can afford to go to college because our family was just above the poverty line, probably. As you probably know, I grew up in Newton, so the former home of Maytag, my entire family's livelihoods had changed in 2002, 2003 when they shut down, bought out by Whirlpool, moved operations to Michigan and Mexico, stuff like that. So I didn't have a future to help me go to school or whatever, right? So. And not only that, but I was a terrible student. Let's be honest. So, like, I was telling myself that, like, oh yeah, I can go to drill 3 blocks. I can go to drill 3 blocks down, get my school paid for. Well, it turns out I didn't go to school college for the first time until I was 34 years old. And then I still quit after that too. So, yeah. And there's a whole nother backstory about that I'm not going to bore you with. It's not about me, but I had to beg my mother to sign up for the service. And I had just turned 17 in November. I signed up in February as well of 2003. And I finally got her to do it. And then, it's I went to Fort Jackson, of course, relax in Jackson. I'm sure you want to beat me up over that one too.
I only passed it. I've never been there.
It's really hot in July.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. It's brutal. I'm sure.
But
so combat engineer.
Yeah. MacGyver.
So how does that evolve into moving into a PA series? And then what brought that on?
Oh, there's the walk of Green Beret, right? Like that's the name of my company. So before you become a PA, right? I decided while I was in the Army, it was like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to do this cool thing. We got back from a deployment and there were schools. The way they do it is units get certain slots for schools and they have a number that are kind of allocated to them. It's like, hey, we've got 10 slots to go to Ranger School and we've got, 8 slots to go to Sapper School. It was an engineer unit and Sapper School's for engineers mostly. And so I was doing train up, the brigade would have a level of train up and they'd be like, hey, we're going to come. And if you want to volunteer to try to get one of these slots, come compete for it. And so I was working out, doing 2-a-days, you do your PT in the morning and I'd go to the gym after work, doing whatever I could to get in the best shape I could possibly be in so I could compete for these slots. And I think if I recall, and this may just be my own, memory telling myself lie after lie. There were schools that I had earned slots to that were taken from me. In my memory, I think it was 3 times I'd earned a sapper school slot. And then there would be a new platoon sergeant that would show up to the brigade or in the battalion, and they'd be like, hey, we can't have a platoon sergeant who doesn't have a sapper tab, right? So we're going to take that slot and give it to him. And I was never the number one performer, right? I wasn't like, hey, you're number one, you're going to get the slot. That guy always got to go, but I'd be like, hey, we got 5 slots, and I'd be like the 5th one or the 4th one, right? I'd do enough to get a slot, and then they'd take it from me. And that happened repeatedly for sapper school, and it happened at least once, maybe twice for ranger school. And I remember I was just done. So we got to the end of my 4 years that I owed the Army. I was on like 2.5 years. We got a deployment that's on the horizon. They're talking, there's whispers, the second deployment's coming up, but there was no like, hey, we're leaving on this date and we're going to this location. And they started talking about reenlistments. And I was in that window where it's like, hey, are you going to reenlist? And I was like, heck no. Right. Like, why would I reenlist to stay in this unit? Every time I earn a slot, you give it off to somebody else. Like I'm doing the work to get it. And then some new guy shows up who hasn't done any of the work. And you're just like, well, he outranks you. We can't have a leader who doesn't have that tab. So we're going to give it away. And I had a phenomenal leader at that time. He was a sergeant major of the staff section that I'd been assigned to. And that sergeant major at E9, so that's the senior rank that you can get to on the enlisted side, he had pulled me aside and said, why don't you try to go to selection to be a Green Beret? When you volunteer for that, you get orders, right? They come with your name and your social security number on them. They've got a date of when you're supposed to go. Like, they can't touch that. Your unit can't take that and give that selection spot to somebody else. It's not there. They can't do it. And so I was like, okay, like, let me try it. And if you get selected, you get orders. Right now, you're going to be a Green Beret. Here's your orders to the Q course so you can qualify to be a Green Beret. And so he had pulled me to the side. He's like, why don't you try that? If you don't get selected, you're gone. If you do get selected, you reenlist. So that I was like, you know what? Forget it. I've been doing all these other train-ups. Like, what's the big deal? Let me do this one too. So I signed up for it. I actually set a selection date out several months in advance, and I just started training up for that, doing lots of rucking up and down Bragg Boulevard and just marching all over the place, trying to get myself in the best, tip-top shape I could be in to carry heavy weight on my back for long distances and consistently run fast, for long distances and whatever I could do to get ready for this thing. I went, got selected, and then coming back from selection, they're like coming back out of the field and they're like, congratulations, going to the admin folks. I go in there to get my orders printed like everybody else so I can report to the Q course. And I remember the lady, it's like, unfortunately, you've been stop lost for a deployment with your unit, so we can't cut you orders right now. So I had to go on that deployment, defer those orders. But when I came back, I was able to get out of some drill sergeant orders that Big Army had put me on and end up going to the Q course. So I was able to get there, qualified as what we call it 18 Delta, but a Special Forces medical sergeant. So I did 2 years of training in the Q course to learn small unit tactics, to specialize in unconventional warfare. And then you go through kind of a culmination exercise at the end of that after some language training and some other things to get ready for that. And then you're in, you arrive to your unit, you get orders for your unit. So my language specialty was Arabic, and I got assigned a 5th Special Forces group out of Fort Campbell. And then I was there. I did that for 6.5, 7 years before I then put in my PA packet. I had another good leader, PA, physician assistant or associate for those who don't know what PA is, who pulled me aside and said, I think this is something you'd be good at, but you're kind of at that point in your career that if you don't want to have to get a waiver or get special permission to go, like, you're going to have to put your packet in now. So I went ahead and I put in my packet, got accepted for that. And then I went to PA school. So finished that, did my last 4.5, almost 5 years as a PA in the Army, and then retired in March. So
when you were stop loss, Dan, did you re-enlist overseas then? Did you get that tax-free break?
You're darn right I did.
Let's go.
Yeah, you're darn right. Combat zone tax exclusion, for those of you unfamiliar with it. Yeah, I think I signed on to for a pretty good bonus. I want to say I got like maybe 24,000 or something like that. All tax-free that came to me. And I'm pretty sure I squandered it all on some like books or, coffee or something. I had nothing to show for it within 2 years, but I got it all, right? Like, it was there. So
You could have bought yourself a little green beans coffee franchise.
I know. Look, again, what do you know, right? I probably wouldn't have stayed in the Army if I knew what I know now about marketing, sales, and things like that. But I didn't know, right? I didn't know, so I just took care of me and my little pocket, my little hole, and tried to make myself feel good. And I squandered it all. I have nothing to show for that money.
I gotta tell you though, like a very well-rounded career though, Dan. Like that's extraordinary from where you started to where you ended up over the course of 20 years active duty. That's quite the experience. Do you have a favorite period of time in your career?
Oh yeah, it's this one right here, the Green Beret part.
Does it say the retire? Oh,
the Green Beret part. Man, you get it's a small detachment, right? You've got 12 men on a team. And I was fortunate. I was part of a special unit there at Group 2 where there were 3 teams that worked together. So there was like up to 36 of us that were consistently working together, but really 12 of us that were with each other most of the time. And you're brothers, right? I mean, you really are. It's like, we hear college athletes talking all the time. Like this is family for me. Well, that's it. That's when you really felt like you had family. When I was part of a larger unit, you felt like you had kind of some cliques and you had some guys that you got along with, and maybe you had a couple guys that you're like, God, they're kind of like family, but not everybody got that way. You had a far larger spectrum of people who disagreed with each other, and you're kind of like, we can get along at work and we can fight with each other, but like, I'm not going to hang out with you all the time. You're just not you're going to clubs and I want to go to bars, right? And you're going to the beach and I want to go hang out in the mountains, right? Like we're going separate directions. But when you're on an ODA, when you're on a team as a Green Beret, like that's your family. You spend so much time together. And if you find yourself you're investing into people, even if you don't see the way that they do. They have one guy's really into lifting weights and you're like, I'd rather run, but I'm going to go lift because I want to hang out with John. Right. Like, and he's a cool dude. And I want to be more with John. I want to hang out with John. I want to like John. I want John to like me. And, you find yourself just investing. We had guys that were just, maybe on the spectrum, right? And super neurotic, super argumentative, flamboyant personalities where you're like, this dude could go off and he might shoot any of us at any moment, right? Like this guy, and he's a shooter, but you want to invest your time into more trigger time. You want to spend more time on the range. You want to be as good as Ben is with that gun in your hand. And you're just like, man, I look back at those times and I wish I had committed more to them. I was at another weird part of my life where kind of politically I had some things revealed to me and things were changing where I felt like I didn't commit to the team like I was supposed to, commit to the group like I was supposed to. Initially I did, but over time I couldn't put the time in. I just couldn't put the effort in because I no longer believed in what we were trying to do and what the mission was. And those guys deserved better from me. But yeah, I look back on every single moment with those guys. It's just, man, I would do it all over again, and in any other, situation, if any of those guys ever called me and was like, brother, I need some help, I would do whatever I could. I'd bend over backwards. I'd, scrape the earth to make something happen for those guys. They're phenomenal human beings and good dudes. So yeah, definitely that time in my life. Definitely the PA stuff. I didn't want to do medicine when I left the Army. They burnt me out.
Let's take a break from Revelton Distilling Company, and then Dan, I want to come back. I want to ask you. Look at that. See, I handed out several free samples of that at the tailgate on Saturday, and a lot of people were shocked at how good their bourbon was.
Yeah, the single barrel bourbon.
The single barrel bourbon.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So let's get a word from Revelton, and I'll come back. Dan, I want to ask you about your time in the Green Beret, and you said how diverse it was. And how that kind of works for you, and what do you take from that into your everyday life now? So we'll be right back.
Making great tasting bourbon requires the perfect combination of ingredients, conditions, and time. The longer it rests, the better it tastes. Revelton Distillery's new single barrel bourbon is made from 80% corn, sourced 100% from Iowa farmers. And unlike mass-produced bourbons, each barrel of Revelton's single barrel bourbon is unique, proofed on when it tastes best. As they like to say, it'll be ready when it's ready. And to ensure the highest standards of quality and flavor, owners Rob and Christy Taylor oversee the production and bottling. Every single barrel. Iowa-born, Iowa-aged, Iowa-bottled. Try the new single barrel bourbon from Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com.
And as I always say, just a phenomenal team down there, and personal friends, Rob and Christy Taylor. What a wonderful job they do. I hear some rumblings that they might have a new rye whiskey coming out soon as well, in addition to their original rye that they have. So yeah, go check them out. 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola. That's the only place you can buy their bourbon, is in the actual distillery right now. But otherwise, all the rest of their products are available statewide. So one thing I do want to quickly talk about is our new Old Man Strength merch. We had a couple listeners that got some new merch here. He's this guy I stumbled upon. He listens, and I was scrolling through TikTok one day, and this guy was doing a TikTok, and he was like doing a handstand, and he fell down and about cracked his head open. And I watched it 2 or 3 times, and I was like, I think that guy's wearing one of our old Man Strength t-shirts. So I tagged him and I said, is that an Old Man Strength? He's like, yeah, I listen all the time. So I had to send him an updated one, because, you know, if he's going to be making TikToks, he's got to have a new
got to rep the brand. The brand.
So check out Three Beards Media Twitter account. You can hit the pin tweet. We've got Old Man Strength merch here. We've got all kinds of different designs for every pod. We've even got Drew's pod, Hawk's Eye View, and some of this cool merch. If you're into Hawkeye stuff, it's Cy-Hawk week. I'm going to let it go and not say anything, but there you go. So, Dan, part of what we talked about at the beginning was you and I kind of, being friends and not seeing eye to eye. And you had mentioned something in this last part when you were talking about being in the Green Berets and how everybody was different, but you still, I wanted to go hang out with this guy, even though he may not be into the same thing that I am. Do you find that helps you a lot, that being in the military and being with those guys? And Drew, maybe you can answer this question too, that you have such a diverse amount of people that might be in those ranks with you, that you learn how to get along and so on, because pretty much your life depends on it, right?
Yeah. So specifically when I said, I kind of had some political revelations, right? Like my background was very super conservative in terms of my politics, and the Ron Paul revolution had happened at that time. So my politics had changed to be very much like against what the government's doing, what the federal government is doing intervention wise. And I'm around a group of killers, right? Like I'm with guys that it's like, no, I've received these orders and this guy is a high value target, and our job is to either go capture him or make him not breathing anymore. Right. And so navigating that while I was kind of having my own political revelation was kind of like, okay, but I don't want any of these guys to not make it home. Right. I want every single one of these guys to make it home. And even though I'm not buying into the mission, I'm still invested into trying to care for these guys. And I think I was in a special position too, because as an 18 Delta, as a special forces medic, like I kind of could be like, I can really care about you and care for you, even if I'm not as great at the shooting stuff. But I realized I was kind of a weakness at that time to the teams. But I was seeing these guys who disagree with me vehemently in terms of the way the world works and how the order structure works and what an oath to the Constitution is supposed to mean, and yet still invested. Every single one of them was my neighbor, my brother, right? We're family. And I think that helped me going forward. And it took a while, right? But I carried that with me going forward, having conversations with other people. And it was like, okay, well, let me reanalyze how I view people who disagree with me on other things and who have disparate opinions from me on things that I think I'm 100% correct on. And I started to realize that even though I still believe on most of those things that I am 100% correct, it's less important to be right and more important to take care of ourselves, our neighbors, right? And it starting to bridge those gaps. In terms of my faith, that all aligns with the faith too, right? In terms of how I think Jesus is trying to call me to a higher place and call me to a better walk in terms of how I love my neighbor, how I love my friends, all of that kind of aligned. And I can still look at what other people are saying and be like, you're wrong, but you want good. You think that what you're seeking is a good thing, and you're very passionate about that. So I can still recognize that in you. appreciate that in you and want what's good for you. And instead of saying, I want to cancel you, or I want to get you pushed off of this, or I want people to stop listening to you. Instead, I want to just convince you to believe what's true. And while I'm doing that, I've had to challenge my own, views on things. Sometimes it's strengthened them, sometimes it's challenged them, and I've had to change some opinions on a few things. I don't know. And as that walk has gone on and as I've grown, I just started understanding it's more important that, Chris is healthy than it is that I'm right on this topic, right? It's more important to me that Chris is in a good place so that I can have a conversation with him than it is that I'm just right. And that's hard. That's hard for me, especially, I got that from my Duesenberg side, my mom's side of the family, very, very, very much like, no, we're going to argue about this. And I, out of love, would have those arguments, but not realizing how much that ostracized people I'm talking to sometimes. And I've had to really kind of rein that in. And I think that helped, right? It's helped me in networking, and it helped me in, we're working with the Lebanese Rangers. We're training them on a range. We're teaching them how to shoot. And there's a cultural disparity there. And so I'm telling them what to do. And they're like, you're enlisted, you swine. You can't talk to me like that. And I'm sitting there going, well, I know how to shoot and you don't, right? Like, I'm just trying to teach you how to shoot. Listen to me. And you have to kind of learn how to navigate that and talk to them and get them in a position where they're going to trust you and build rapport with them. And it's difficult. I'm still terrible at it, but I think I'm better at it than some just because I'm practicing, right? So.
Yeah, Chris. So I would say, so my experience is a little less intimate in regards to like battlefield relationships or small squad tactics, stuff like that. Like I definitely not a Green Beret by any means, but I would say being a leader over the last, 15 years of the Guard that I've been in, I felt it was more important to listen to your soldiers, right? To understand where they're coming from and not necessarily be argumentative about it, or just learn where they are in the spectrum of the world and how they think and see things. Because if you can understand where they're coming from, you can be a better leader to them to help them get their needs later on down the line, right? So we use words like good order and discipline. We use tact, right? We use words when we need to use words, and nothing more than that, right? So, like I said, I don't have the intimate battlefield experience that Dan does. As far as I still have friends that I deployed with in 07, 08 that I talk to almost on a daily basis, right? But I don't have, our experiences are different, which makes serving in the military really great. Actually, everybody gets a different experience. But yeah, spending more time listening, I found, to me personally, has probably been the best growth I've made as a leader, especially like the last 4 or 5 years that I've moved out here to the DC area, kind of serving at the national level, kind of understanding my role, understanding where I'm at. I'm not in the Iowa. Well, I am in the Iowa National Guard. It's very complicated. I'm still assigned to the Iowa National Guard, but I work for the National Guard Bureau, right? So I have to understand who my audience is, who I work for, and who's appropriate professionalism, things like that, right? So I would say my experience with that is what I got from it so far, I guess.
I missed this comment earlier from Jason Drew to you that he wanted to tell you from the bottom of his heart it was one of the best choices you've made. He missed and worried about you like crazy during your deployments, but he was super proud of you as well. Jason, I believe, is your former co-host from the Iowa Sports Podcast and one of your best friends, right?
Jason is my best man here in a couple months on my wedding. So yep.
Well, there you go.
We've known each other since 5 years old. Berg Elementary, Newton, Iowa, baby. Yep. love you, brother. No, I appreciate that. That's great.
I think what I've learned in my friendship with Drew and Dan in our talks and whatever, and in a lot of other aspects is that and another great example here is Teddy Holly, who's on this platform as well. I've never been in the military. I'm also not a small business owner, right? Or whatever. So for me to arrogantly sit back and have opinions about what I think you guys think or go through and not really experience that, and to steadfast say statements or whatever that I feel are true, is probably something I used to do, right? Like I would say things like, how could anybody in the military, and I don't want to get into a discussion about Trump, but I'll use it as an example. I don't, but it's a good example of,
I'll drink to that.
Right. I used to say I don't know how anybody in the military can support him after what he said about John McCain, right? Like in my mind, that's impossible. Anybody that owns a business and got their business shut down in 2020, I don't know how they can support this and this and this. But then in talking to other people and learning their perspectives and learning what they've experienced, it would be arrogant for me to sit here and say that you're wrong in that experience. And I was at the boys' convention this year, and they had a keynote speaker, and this has always stuck with me ever since then. He's like, I don't think I've been in an argument for 20 years. And I thought, okay, well, that's bullshit. Now I want to argue about that. But his statement is that if you tell me a statement and you tell me something, it's true to you, right? Like, that's your perception. Okay. You know, who am I to argue with your perception of something or whatever?
I'll try.
Oh, I know you will. I know you will. But I think what he was getting at is that everybody's experiences are different. And there's a respect level of, okay, I respect your perception of that, right? That's not necessarily that you're wrong or that you're right, but that's that's how you perceive it to be. That's true, right? So doesn't necessarily mean that you are right or whatever, but I'm not going to argue with what your perception of that is.
Right.
That's I think is a good.
Yeah.
Good
and I think probably the struggle for me when it came to a lot of that too was believing there is a truth. Right.
Yes.
And that even though somebody else's truth might conflict with that, I still have my faith and trust is there is still only one truth, right? There's one that is true, and we all have different perspectives on that, and some of us may be wrong. But I think I heard this saying once, and this was when I was younger, man, when I was way more zealous about a lot of things too. But it was something like where we conflict, right? Where we're arguing, only one of us can be correct. Yeah. Both of us can be wrong, but only one of us can be correct, right? Like if we actually have a conflicting viewpoint, only one of us can be right. And I used to just carry like, no, only one of us can be right, right? And I'm going to be the one, right? I'm going to be right. And I had to really temper that when I started realizing, even if I am right, how do I communicate that to you? How do I portray that to you? How do I convince you of what I know to be true? I'm convinced is true, whether I'm right or not, I'm convinced it's true. And having to really temper, how do I communicate that to people, right? How do I portray that so that they're receptive of it? So I'm not closing that door. So if I really think you're going to hurt yourself by doing something that I think is, going to long-term be damaging to you, I want to convince you not to do it. The last thing I want to do is get you to close that door. If I'm the only voice that's ever going to get you to, or convince you to do that, if I'm the only one who's ever going to have that door open and have the opportunity to communicate it, the last thing I want to do is have you slam that door in my face and never talk about it again. And it's really true for my faith. I think it was Penn and Teller, who was like, hey, if you're a believer, right? If you have a faith and you honestly believe that if I don't believe I'm going to hell, I want you to try to convince me, right? I don't trust you if you're not willing to do everything it takes to convince me to believe what you believe, because that means you don't care about me. And I think that's where I've had to kind of be like, I do care. That's why I want to have these arguments with people. That's why I want to have these discussions with people. And then having to realize I was forcing people to just close off. I was forcing people to block me on Twitter because I was too confrontational. And real, how do I back that off? How do I try to keep that door open so I can have a conversation with somebody without just feeling like I'm, scoring a Twitter goal or a victory, right? Like some meaningless thing. And yeah, man, it's tough. It's tough, but I've had to do it in real life too. I've had, siblings that disagree with me on things, parents that have disagreed with me. You see it all the time.
Yeah. And a lot of the conversations that we have that we fight so hard to be right about, like, what does it accomplish at the end of the day, right? Like, very small, petty things in the grand scheme of the world, right? Like you said, we're all wanting the same things in life and then in the world, right? Yep. We want to all be taken care of. We all want to be, we all have the same principles. And I feel, to me, I feel like people are generally good. Like they mean well, generally speaking. Now, obviously, there's imposters and bad players out there, right? We all know that, but
right.
I
and they're all politicians on both sides of the aisle, just for the record.
Yep. I like it. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to get you the Wintrust, Kyle Lehman Wintrust Mortgage of the question of the pod, and then we're going to get Drew. Drew's got a hard stop at 9 o'clock because he's got to make some bad draft choices.
I'm up right now.
Well, there you go. Well, maybe you can make your pick during the break.
Okay, let's do that.
Let's get a word back from Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage, and then Dan, I'm going to come back. I'm going to ask you the question of the pod here.
Okay.
Whether you're buying, selling, or refinancing your home, or if it's simply time to renovate the one you're already living in, you need an experienced mortgage professional to help you analyze your financing options and to make sure the closing goes smoothly. And that's exactly what you get when you call Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage. Kyle's experience and expertise, coupled with Wintrust's rates and programs, ensures you'll get the mortgage that's right for you. You may even qualify for down payment assistance. Before you reach out to a realtor, call Kyle and get pre-qualified, empowering you to start shopping for the home of your dreams. Call Kyle at 515-473-0546. Kyle Lehman Wintrust Mortgage, 515-473-0546.
All right,
when you do call a realtor, call Green Beret Realty.
That's right. Absolutely right. That's right. Okay. The Kyle Wintrust Mortgage question of the pod is this. What keeps you up at night, Dan?
Oh, man. Kids. And I don't mean because they're not sleeping well. My kids honestly sleep pretty good. When we get them on a routine and we keep them on a routine, they sleep well. But I look down the road. I got a 9, 7, and 3-year-old, right? And where am I going to be at in 5, 10 years? Where are they going to be at? And have I raised them well? Have I loved them well? Right? Do they trust me? Do they confide in me? Are they willing to bring me their problems so I can help them navigate those things? Like, am I a good dad? And that, that's vested in my faith. That's vested in my profession. That's vested in my family values. I really do have a fear in, like, am I going to have been an epic failure in 10 years? Right. Like, where am I going to be, and where are they? And that metric is going to be, who are they, right? As people, like, in their mid to late teens, where are they? And how am I doing as a dad? Yeah. Oh man. Now I'm probably going to have nightmares tonight. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Scott.
I didn't know that question was coming. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah. No, we try to change it up here. People listen to the pod, and then they prepare for the question, and then every once in a while you got to throw them.
Oh, man.
So let's talk real quick here. Retired now. What brought you into the real estate game, and what is your goal when it comes to you have a young family looking for a home? What is your goal for them and to accomplish with them?
First of all, I think every real estate agent out there, their goal is to try to figure out what it is that buyer or that seller really is trying to get out of that, the purchase or sale of a home. Really, especially with a younger family and stuff, I really want to dive in and understand who they are as people, understand what it is that they're trying to get to. Like, long term, what is your goal? If this is a temporary thing that you see as a 3 to 5 year fix, then let's look at it with that perspective, right? If this is something that you plan on growing out of because you want more kids, then let's have that conversation. We don't need to get you into a $450,000, $500,000 house just because you can afford it if it's just you two and you don't have any kids yet, right? And if you're planning to start a family, like, do you really need more than 2 or 3 bedrooms, right, to start a family? And so if you can spend a few years putting some money away, putting yourself in a better financial position and set yourself up for future success, I want to know that. I want to know what your goals are so I can help you get into a home, and the right home for you and your family. It is hard sometimes. Some clients come to you and they're just like, this is what I'm looking for. And there's a little wiggle room in how to kind of navigate that process and really do that. But as you get established and I build up more networks and I build rapport with more people, I've had more conversations about that. And that's the goal, right? And I think every realtor really does want that. Maybe some of us are better at it than others. But yeah, ultimately, like, we just want to help that client get their dreams, right? What does that look for you, and how do we navigate that process? And if I can help you over the next 20 years for repeat transactions, that's a win for me, right? I want you to have such a good, relationship with me and such a good opportunity, like that one valuable transaction that you're like, I'm going to try him again, right? And let's have another valuable transaction. Let's do it again, right? And you get to that point where you're like, all right, now we're in our dream home, retirement home. Cool. I want to be the guy who's got you all the way through there. So that would be my goal. I probably won't live long enough to get anybody to retirement, but we'll see,
Well, if people want to come meet Dan, they can come and meet Dan, but also they really want to come meet Conrad Holly. So this Saturday, we are doing a special meet and greet with Conrad Holly, courtesy of Green Beret Realty, at Coach's Kolaches, Brent Curvey's shop. This Saturday, September 7th, we're going to start at 10 o'clock. We're going to do a live preview of the Cyhawk game with Dave and Brent on the mics. Conrad will be there to take pictures, sign autographs. The tailgate ambulance will be there. Dan will be there giving out free kolaches. I think I saw a tweet. You're going to give out the first 20 kolaches?
First 20. I said Conrad was buying them, but I'm paying. So,
but come out to Coach Kolaches in Urbandale, 10 to 11:30 next Saturday, and meet Conrad and meet Dan. So, we're going to get our last segment here, which is our Steph Copley Shut the Fuck Up segment, which I really should move this up farther in the pod. This really is my favorite, but it's only because I love to tell the story that she told my former host, Tim, to shut the fuck up so she could get her point across. And in ironic fashion, she once co-hosted this and interrupted the guy in her segment. And I told her, Steph, you don't even know how to work your own fucking segment. It was so great. But the way this works, Dan, is we're going to play an ad. We're asking people, because it's something important that Three Beards Media does, is ask people to give money back. And before I forget, Dan was so generous with our last fundraiser for AJ. We made a goal of $3,700. We blew that out of the water, and we're able to raise almost $6,000 for AJ's family. And in true fashion, Amy just loves that little boy and does anything for him, and they're big Hawk fans. And I sent him a Side and I sent them a Side the Storm shirt, in addition to a Hawk's Eye View shirt. But I had to slip that Side the Storm one in there just for them. So
nice.
But let's get a word from Steph. I invite you to donate to the Young Women's Resource Center, and then Dan, when we come back, Drew and I have to shut the fuck up, and you can say whatever you want. Oh, this is gonna be rough.
Hey everybody, it's Steph Copley, the woman behind the STFU segment on the Old Man Strength podcast. When I told the guys I wanted to sponsor this segment, they recommended that I make a charitable donation instead, so that's what I did. I chose the Young Women's Resource Center in Des Moines, Iowa. They're a nonprofit that supports, educates, and advocates for girls and young women ages 10 to 24. Their whole goal is to make sure that these young women become strong, self-confident, and successful. And if you know me at all, you know that aligns with my goals as well. If you're interested and would like to donate, check them out at ywrc.org and donate today. And remember, don't forget to STFU and listen every once in a while. Thanks.
The stage is yours, Dan.
It's dangerous. I don't know why you did this. Let's start with, politics is a monopoly on violence, right? Whenever we get political about things, we get tribal, we get partisan, we start hating on each other unnecessarily. Most of us, if you're talking to your neighbor, probably don't see eye to eye. If you're talking to your own family members, you don't see eye to eye. You've got the ostracized family member, that sister or that brother just irritates you, and you just don't want to go to Christmas because they're going to be there. Listen, we all should be trying to provide value to those around us. And every single one of us believes that we are adding value to those around us. Whether that's the corporate CEO of some massive corporation, whether that's that, sinister politician who's greasing his pockets with, corporate dollars, or whether it's your neighbor who's, not mowing his side of your fence, right? It doesn't matter what's going on. Every single one of us thinks we're providing value to these things, and understand that the people who you disagree with or who you think you're in conflict with are trying to provide value. The guy who cuts you off thinks he's late for work and he needs to speed because he wants to be to work on time, or he doesn't want to be there later than he has to be because he knows that his team at work is dependent on him. the person who's, ticking you off at a game and they're yelling, like they think that their voice is actually going to change the way that offensive lineman's playing and blocking on the field, right? They think they're contributing value, and just understand that person, no matter who they are, how irritating they are, how much they annoy you, they think that what they're doing is valuable. And that's what our whole goal as humanity should be, is loving and providing value to one another. And we can disagree on that, but it doesn't matter whether you're, checking the red Republican or the blue donkey. It doesn't matter if you're like me and the gold porcupine over here, right? That should be your goal, is providing value, whether that's in business, whether that's in relationships. It doesn't matter. Let's provide value to one another, right? Let's get over this silly stuff and just love and provide value to each other, right? You may need Jesus, but that's going to be the love and value. So
absolutely love it. Great. Drew, you got any closing remarks?
No, man, it's been nice to meet you, Dan, and hearing your story and your journey in the military, how you got to Green Beret Realty. I wish you nothing but luck and success. We appreciate your sponsorship of the pods and the Three Beards Media family, man. Like, welcome onto the team, and look forward to maybe having some beers when I'm back in Iowa or something.
Yep, sure. We should do this again after the Cyclones kick the Hawkeyes' butt on Saturday.
Yeah, baby. There we go. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Now we need some hate.
All right.
Well, let's talk real quick here. Three Beards Media is up for 3 awards for podcasts. Old Man Strength obviously is up for has made the final nominee list of best interview podcast in Iowa, going against 5 other pods, which I'm sure are very worthy, but I haven't listened to them. So, but on the flip side, you can also go to the Iowa Podcast Awards, click on the awards and then the People's Choice, and go vote for our 3 pods that are also up for People's Choice Awards. 3 Blind Refs, which is a super fun podcast. Fall Starts with Bill Blank and myself, and then, of course, Old Man Strength. We'd love for you guys to go and vote. So, again, you can go to the Iowa Podcast Awards, go to the People's Choice Awards, and choose those 3 Beards Media podcasts. That would be super great. Dan, Drew, happy Cy Week. Cyclones 28, Iowa 23. That's my prediction.
Oh, man. Are we going to do predictions?
We're asking predictions?
Drew's. No, you can tune in to Hawk's Eye View for Drew's prediction.
Dan's not turning into the Hawkeye show. I'm just going to tell him right here while I have him right here. We're going 20. We're going 24-10. 24-10.
Iowa State? Oh.
No. Iowa State's going to have a hard time scoring on that Iowa defense.
Honestly, I'm not going to lie to you. I fear that. I fear it. I didn't like the way that we looked, but then I went back and I looked at the stats, how well we actually moved the ball. We had some inconsistencies. We didn't have many offensive possessions. I'm more worried about our defense, and I don't trust that the Hawk offense is going to be consistent enough to score on them. I still don't like it. What's Matt Campbell, like 1-6 against the Hawks, right? Yeah. He's going to try to stay too vanilla. He's going to try to keep it on the ground too much and control it too much instead of just airing it out and let the boys fly, right? Like Jalen Knoll, Jay Higgins, Ben Ngoyi, right? Like those guys should be running amok in the Hawkeye defensive backfield, and I just don't trust that he's going to let that ball sling. Man, I think the Hawkeyes are going to win. I want the Cyclones to win, but I think the Hawks are probably going to win a close one again, and I'm just going to be distraught and probably depressed going into our week 4 after the bye week game, and then we'll probably score 50 on Arkansas State or whoever it is we play, and I'll feel like we're going to win the whole thing again. So
that sums up a Cyclone fan if I've ever heard one.
At least he was honest with his prediction. He wasn't trying to go homer. You know what I mean?
Well, I can't help it.
But I could see it being something stupid too. It's going to be like an 18-19 game, right?
Or we'll fumble. We'll muff a punt.
Yeah, we're going to muff a punt almost in field goal territory to lose it by a point again or something stupid, right? It's going to be, and then we're going to talk about the margins, and Chris Hassel is going to be on his podcast talking about how they should hit field goals. It's like, no, man, we missed a block. That's the margin, right? Like, yeah, man, so frustrating. So frustrating. I honestly, and I appreciate what Matt Campbell does, right? I'm sorry if I'm going to keep you guys too long, but
nope, you're good.
Coaching, teaching, mentoring young men. And we have in the Army what we call crawl, walk, run. right? And you start from a crawl phase and you watch every season. They're coming out of fall camp, and it's very much like, this is what this team needs to do to be successful.
Yep.
And he guides them through that. And then as he starts realizing maybe they can't do this or they're gonna do it, you watch them progress and get better. Either that's a change in what the coaching staff's asking them to do, or it's a change in the way that players are starting to perform and actually execute what they're being asked to do. So you do see that growth every season. But man, September is brutal under Matt Campbell.
Yep.
Every time September ends, I'm like, this guy's got to be on the hot seat. And by the time we're in November again, I'm like, never mind. He's the coach of the season. Like, I love this guy, giving him hugs, and I understand what he's doing. I really appreciate what he's doing. But man, I eventually want that crawl phase to start being what we think is a walk phase, right? If we can crawl at a walk pace and then walk at a run pace and then start sprinting towards the end of the season, like, that's where we want to be, right? Like, that's where the Cyclone faithful really wants to see it. And you watch it happen every season. You just wish you could start further along that process than we are. So he's phenomenal. He's the best coach Iowa State's probably ever had. I think the only time we've gone to this many bowl games in a row or had above 500 seasons since the 1920s is what I told Brent Bloom one time. We haven't had this many seasons above 500, right? It's been since the 1920s, since we had 5 in a row that were like above 500. It's miserable, right? As a Cyclone fan, and Matt Campbell's doing it. So tip the hat to that man. Like, he is doing what we need, but September is brutal. It is so frustrating watching us go out against FCS opponents and just like, whatever you're doing, man, like, so frustrating every season. And you're just like, why? So yeah, that's where we're at. And that's why I have Revelton Distillery.
We're gonna end right there. That's perfect. All right. We got a stacked week this week on the Three Beards Media Network. We have Side of the Storm with special guest Eric Heft tomorrow night. Wednesday is Ball Don't Lie. The guys come back for Ball Don't Lie. Thursday, Drew, you guys are going to do Hawk's Eye View. I think it's 6, right? And then at 8:00 is Three Blind Refs, and then of course our live event Saturday. So and then we start back again next week. So everybody check out all the pods on the Three Beards Media Network, and we are out of here.